Okay, we live stream every single meeting that you have.
All
That
right.
may change next week, after Thursday's
Go
conversation.
ahead.
3, 2, 1.
And welcome to a briefing on the Flex unit. It is April 14th, 2020. And for those watching this live streaming, we'll do introductions internally, then we'll go to people on the screen as well. I'm John Hutchings, County Commissioner.
Time answer.
And Romero Chavez?
Robin Campbell.
And start with the sheriff and work your way down.
John Snaza,
Todd Toma.
Jim Downing, George Eaton.
Tim Branna.
Oh, we have everybody.
Okay. Chris Helmer here, project manager.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And so we're good for, it's 12:38 now, and this is, this goes for an hour, so it's actually gonna end at 1:30. So, you wanna frame this?
Yes, Commissioners, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. This is a follow-up conversation the commissioners had maybe a couple of weeks ago. And it was related to the concept of a regional jail facility and some of the conversations that Commissioner Messer, as directed by the board, to engage some of the partners, in this case the cities, as to how a concept of a regional jail can be part of our future. During that conversation, there was a lot of discussion among the board members as to, whether the Flex unit will continue to be part of this process. And also at that point was asked what options perhaps we have looked at in terms of the Flex unit. And I made a reference that we have provided some options in the past. And also you requested to bring those options back, and also ask Sheriff Snaza and his staff to be part of this conversation, to hear their perspective as to how this flex unit is needed, not needed, what any other options perhaps we could have. And it was just bringing all the conversation to the surface again. Also, one of the pieces of information that we left with you last time you had a discussion on this is we're in the process of signing a contract. We haven't done so already with a consultant to begin the design of the Flex unit as directed by the board unanimously a few months ago. And that design of the Flex unit included a 40-45 bed additional capacity, as well as the design of a shell for a potential future expansion. And Chris is here to give you a perspective as to how that contract is going through. And hopefully in this hour, we can bring this issue up for discussion again. And I believe we have all the parties that need to be in this meeting. And how about if we leave Robin to walk us through this document?
I think I can do that. Sure, I can take a shot at that. So this document was prepared in 2016. The board has been looking at alternatives for meeting our need for additional beds for quite some time now. We knew when we moved into the new jail that it was going to be crowded right from the get-go. So I was directed at that time to look for funding to build the additional beds. But we did explore other options as outlined in this document. So I'm just going to tell you, you've got an attachment here that is, that lays out in a snapshot all of the different options. But we'll try to walk through each one. And I will also note that at the time this document was prepared, I was not the Director of Central Services. I was still, I think, just the budget manager. So I'll do my best to walk through what Martin Casey had brought to the board at that time. And I would appreciate other people who were here at this time to chime in. So if you look at page 2, I'm gonna go straight to the options. Option 1 has 2 parts, both concerned with using the juvenile detention facility. Option 1A was to build a separate new smaller facility for the youth that we currently house. That would be about 20 beds, 25 beds. We estimated that that would cost, and well, before I get to the cost, I'm gonna take a step back. These numbers are 2016 dollars. This is, you'll see, this is back when we thought that the more beds would cost about $12 million. So don't get hung up on these dollar amounts. They are absolutely old. They will have escalated. There was very little work put into them. So don't think we could do this today for $9 million. It would cost significantly more.
But it does serve as a point of comparison,
Yes,
because the numbers and the cost estimates are at the same time, at the same level, with not much detail behind.
right. And so we thought we could do additional beds at that time for about 12 million, and this option would have cost 23 million. Because we would build the new facility for around 9 million, and then the conversion of the current facility was estimated to cost closer to 15. The upside, of course, is that we'd be using space that we currently have that is mostly vacant. And we'd get to design a new juvenile facility with all the current knowledge of how those ought to work. But the downside is it's costly, it's complex, it moves the kids away from the family court, and you have, since this was prepared, the board has received a letter from the court strongly opposing this option. Option B was to move all the youth into one section, which they probably already are, but to also then reconstruct another section of the current facility so that it could house adults. Now, we thought that this at the time would cost between 8 to 10 million, but the downside there was that we didn't know if we could house adults in the same facility as kids, and we have since discovered that we cannot. So this is not an option, and again, you've heard the court's opinion on this.
I gotta ask a question about this.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I don't understand why option B was even looked at. I can't, I've known my whole career that you can't put juveniles and adults in the same building.
Yeah.
So this makes me question whether or not everything was thought out adequately, and was there hidden agendas, inflated costs to discourage a move one way or the other, or reduce costs to promote or discourage. I don't know, but that bothers me that we put that kind of research into something that any police administrator would have known right off the bat, that's
That was my
not
first-
doable.
That was my first thought.
And-
And you missed this part, but we only have 45 minutes
At the
left.
time, I'd like to respond
Oh,
to
no, you
that.
can, but we only have 45 minutes left, and this is 2016 that we're looking at.
I
So
know,
at the
okay.
time, the reason this is on here is at the time, we did not have 2 former police officers sitting on the Board of County Commissioners, and staff were specifically asked to price this option out.
Well,
It was
So we
directed
were
by the board.
responding to the board at that time.
So and at that time,
There
the
was
staff,
no agenda
their
by the
project
staff.
project managers, no jail administrators. So
yeah, Okay, that makes sense.
And with all due respect,
Surely you can understand, Commissioner, we're coming up with a dumb idea.
I've come up with some myself, I'm sure, so.
Should have shared, Dan.
So, on the next page, is option 2. This is construction of the flex unit. You're very familiar, with this option. So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on it, other than to say that at the time, we thought it would cost less than $12 million, and you've seen the current numbers.
39,
Yeah,
more than triple.
yes. Option 3, we looked at the possibility of installing temporary modular unit at the jail. And that was a little less money, not a lot less money. It would have added the beds that we were looking for and leveraged the existing infrastructure. But the downside is that temporary modular units would be exactly that, temporary. And since it cost not a whole lot less than actually building the beds and expanding the jail, we thought it was much more economical in the long run to just get it built. So option number 4, option E, would be to convert the work release facilities. Again, it adds the beds, it uses an existing infrastructure. The downside of this was that we didn't know if the project would pass the permitting and legal considerations. So all of these options needed more work.
Can
These
you
were-
expand on that just a little bit?
I can't say a lot more on that. I know that the structure, the way it currently is, and I would ask the experts to weigh in on this, but it is not a hardened facility is my understanding. So it's not like we can just move them in. It would need some work, and perhaps a member of our sheriff's team could speak to that.
Todd?
Using the options building as a hardened facility.
The options building, it was an existing facility already on site that was remodeled into a correctional options facility. Again, it's not detention grade. There's codes as far as fire escapes. The security is not detention grade. Again, it can't be used for, as it exists right now, for an actual detention grade or a detention level facility.
Right, thank you. So, you know,
What would it take to change that?
well, we would have
Is that part
to
of it?
explore that.
Oh,
That's
okay.
part of what we didn't look
Okay.
into.
Okay.
And then, option F is to reopen sections of the old jail. And you see an amount of less than $2 million at the time. This was only to open certain areas of the jail. There is in your packet, this sheet of paper that helps you see somewhat the areas that we're talking about. It's mainly this section in the lower right quadrant of the floor plan is mainly what we were talking about. We would provide about 110 beds. Only 40 to 60 of those would have been single cell or high security. We could do that on a temporary basis, but once again, the infrastructure needs of that facility really wouldn't sustain a long-term occupation of the jail, even in those few areas. So you then see number 6, which is option G, the remodeling of the jail to bring it up to code and address the issues in the old facility. And once again, you see that the costs are just not very much less of what it takes to build the beds at the new jail And the downside there, and really to all of these options that are not at the jail, are the long-term operational costs of running more than one team. So in a nutshell, that's a very quick walkthrough. I wanted to be quick, to leave most of your time for conversation.
So also, we have reviewed this series of alternatives with the board on a couple of occasions. And what it was parallel to this in the last couple of years, if not a little bit longer, was the series of letters that we received from Disabilities Rights of Washington. And I don't think I need to go through in level of detail as to what their concerns were on the existing jail. And also some of the responses the board provided to DRW, in which one of those responses, in addition to address other items, was the commitment to increase capacity on the jail. Because right now, the issues that we have and I believe the issues that we need to address on the existing facility, they may not necessarily be related to additional capacity, but actually housing individuals in areas of the existing jail that they don't supposed to be there to begin with. So all that conversation occurred with you and also the sheriff's office was part of that discussion prior to the board providing a direction to move forward with the design of the flex unit, with the design of the shell for a potential expansion in the future. And I believe, I don't want to put words on the sheriff, but I believe the sheriff also supported this option to go with the shell option for, at least at the design concept right now, to give the option for a potential expansion in the future. And it was that this is taking us to this point right now. I know the discussions, the decisions the board has provided and has made and provided direction. And again, what has evolved in the last maybe couple months is the concept of a regional facility. I think there is an opportunity to have those discussions with the other jurisdictions, and I believe there is a lot of momentum behind that and a lot of interest. And if that materializes, and this is just my humble perspective, I believe the shell that is currently being thought out as part of the design could serve as a potential option to expand as a regional jail facility, if that is the case.
I would like to hear what is meant by regional jail facility. I can tell you what I look at it from that perspective. I mean, Yakima County, for an example, some years back, took over the operation of the county jail for the sheriff, thinking they were gonna save money. Their budget was up more than twice in the first 3 years of what it had been. So it didn't pan out for Yakima County. So I'm curious what a regional jail concept, I guess, well, to me, it would be run by the sheriff, but to compensate the municipalities as participants, but not as co-operators. I don't think a democracy system will work in running a jail, but they could participate and have X amount of cells or, something like that. But when it comes to the regional concept of we're gonna have 4 players involved and we're gonna have a little democracy, I don't see that happening. That's not what I would be in favor of. I would be in favor of giving relief to the municipalities, but it would be under the guidance of the sheriff.
Maybe.
So, yeah, Sheriff, I'm gonna get to you in a minute, you and maybe Todd or Tim, but I wanna hear from Ty first, go ahead.
Answering that question. So I don't think that it's determined. I can tell you from the preliminary conversation that if the sheriff's office were running the regional jail, which works great for me, I know that there'd have to be an interlocal agreement that would iron out some of the management and policy issues. I think, and some, maybe an advisory board or something, excuse me. But I think that's potentially a solution. I think there may be other proposals for how it goes, but I certainly think the sheriff running it under a joint agreement about management and policy with at least Olympia, who would be a financial contributor, would be one model.
Wouldn't Lacey and Tumwater be involved?
No, not really, because they don't have, unless they want to kick in money to build, walls. They're gonna be operating on instead of contracting with Nisqually, they'd be contracting with Olympia and Thurston County.
Yeah, I don't see the duplicity role in managing the jail. It's got to, my opinion, gotta be the sheriff's office. They can't do rock, paper, scissors when it comes to making decisions.
Right.
Doesn't work that way in the jail. And these things do have to be hammered out policies ahead of time. Sheriff, you wanna give us your thoughts, sir?
Sure. First thing I'll talk about is the regional jail concept. Is basically the idea is that if there are issues about how we're running the jail now, both with my felonies and my misdemeanors, I would appreciate some input before I even go to a table with either Olympia, Lacey, or Tumwater, or Yelm, or whomever. The deal is on that is that if I'm responsible for this jail, it's going to have to go by the rules that we set forth and the policies that we provide. And I know that Olympia has a different way of doing business, and obviously that would have to be worked out. But it's going to go the way we do business unless something's been brought up that I'm unaware of or that you three have decided that I don't do appropriately. As far as the flex unit is in February of 2019, I actually sent a letter to all three of you about me saying what I would like in the flex unit. And I asking for 120 beds. I can tell you that even today, with my population being down in the jail itself, and even in the high-risk offender, or if you will, the SILD units, my female population is still in the same location that they've always been. And my fear is that if a decision is not made, because we've been going back and forth on this for many years, is that we will be sued. And I did bring that up to you folks in our last meeting when our briefing was similar like this about a year ago. So what I'm hoping out of this meeting is that a decision is made, because from my understanding, the decision was made that there would be at least a 40-bed facility done with possibly a shell, and it would cost about $19 million, and then 25 with a shell. And where I come in is that I'm looking at it for the future, because we know that even though our population is down, it's based on what we're experiencing right now. With the release of over 1,000 inmates in Department of Corrections and how many cases are being referred out, we're going to see an increase in high-risk offenders, which we're already seeing today, because that's all we're taking are high-risk offenders. So we're still seeing it. We're just not holding everybody for the lower risk felonies, and we're having them all referred out. So I really am fearful that the future is going to be that we are going to be overcrowded, understaffed, and I'm not going to have a facility to where I can put the people who are high risk offenders in celled units. That's where I'm at.
Chief Toma, you have anything to add?
Just to kind of add to what the sheriff was saying, just to give you a snapshot. On March 1st of this year, in our C-Tank, which is our maximum custody special needs, that's that celled housing unit, that we've been talking about for quite some time now. We had 81 defendants on March 1st in that housing unit. As of today, we have 72. So that's only a difference of 9 right now. And with all the efforts to reduce our population, again, greatly appreciate all the participants in the law and justice system locally. A large majority of the people that were released from custody were from our dormitory units. Those are our low risk. So what we're seeing come in is continuing to see more high-risk defendants, and more likely than not, those high-risk defendants are going to go into our maximum custody special needs housing unit, at least initially. So the issue of cell units is still in play.
Okay.
Could I do a follow-up on
Let me
that?
ask you, hey, Tim, did you have anything to add, Under Sheriff?
Just a couple of just quick things to go along with what the sheriff was talking about and maintaining. I think the initial proposal, and when we were having discussions over the last year, it was about a way to generate funds through contract beds, not necessarily a regional concept. Even though it sounds good, I know Yakima and SCORE, they've had a lot of issues with the cities. In fact, some of the cities are actually venturing off and contracting with others, I think, which the consultant would find out later on if we were to move forward on it. But I think, for an example, the Olympia wanting specific policies and things like that. Well, if they contract out, currently I think they do with Lewis County, they have an agreement or a contract, but they don't necessarily get to call the shots or to call what Lewis County's policies are and how to correct those. And I'm sure they work through those if there was an issue, but those are developed by the sheriff's office down in Lewis County. And I think the cities of Tumwater, Lacey, and Yelm are looking for guaranteed bed space. And this would be, just preliminarily, we threw some numbers on the board, and it could be a way to generate over $1 million to help cut some of our, I'm assuming, staffing costs, because that's what is mostly generated in the cost per day. But that's guaranteeing them certain space would also guarantee us a certain amount of revenue if we had a contract for either 3 to 5 years to guarantee them. And that's just for misdemeanor space. That's not necessarily for the felony space. And then it would give us an opportunity to include other medical costs or other additional costs that the city of Olympia is not paying, or the other cities pay the Nisqually jail. And they would just basically have to support and pay for those costs if they were to contract with us instead of, Lewis County or SCORE or somewhere else. And I think that's where we could benefit as a county, as more of a contract concept with the region versus a regional system.
Okay, Gary?
For Todd, you said you had 72 in the C unit now. How many is that designed for?
That population, because we double bunked it on the recommendation of the consultant's report some years ago, the capacity is 120, but a lot of those folks are single-celled status because of either their crimes, their behaviors, significant mental health history, they may be predatory, so a number of those folks are on single-cell status.
So that building, that cell block was originally designed for 60 inmates, and then you double bunked it?
30.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the exact figures were. I just know when we added bunks, and we didn't add bunks to the entire unit, or to the entire, yes, the unit, it came up to 120 beds.
Anything else?
Not sure where we're going.
Okay, so where we,
Well, you asked to have this conversation again, and again, the decision of the board as it is right now is you gave direction, and it was unanimous vote, for staff to continue on and enter into a contract with an architectural firm to design the 44 or 5 cells, flex unit, and also design the shell for a potential building expansion. In that decision, you held back the construction. The construction, at this point, you provide direction to go ahead all the way to construction for the flex unit, the 40-45 bed. The only decision as it stands right now, whether you like to include the construction of the shell as part of the flex unit. That's how the decision is right now. So the,
Except you recently asked to put a pause
Yeah.
on that.
so in last week, you said, hold on until you have this meeting today. And that's where we are. And the question that I have is whether the board would like to change that direction.
I want to ask Chris, since you're on board with it, Chris, where you
Yes, sir.
are, where you are now, and anything you'd like to add.
Where we are right now is we are absolutely ready to award the design contract. It's waiting the final signature for the obligation of funds to the negotiated contract. We can start as soon as we get that contract and execute with the AE firm. I don't have a whole lot more to add to the discussion other than we do need to also consider the stormwater mitigation issue on the site. We're running parallel with that. I've been including Robin in the discussions related to that. We want to ensure that that doesn't hold us up when it comes to permitting, so we're working that track as well currently.
We're ready to award the contract. Are we under any time constraint there?
Well, the time constraints that we're under are because of resourcing from the AE firm. If we can't award this thing within a reasonable amount of time, and I would say a couple of weeks at the outside, they have to resource their people to other projects, and then we'll be back to negotiations with them related to how they would resource this particular project. They've been pretty reasonable about holding on for the time being, but there is other work that they need to accomplish, and we want to ensure that we get the right people resourced to this particular project.
Okay, go ahead, Gary.
And how many dollars are you talking about on this contract? Chris?
$2 million for the design.
For the design. And for Todd, how many beds did you end up having in the work release area?
What, the number currently?
Well, no, I know you don't have very many in there at all. But I mean, what was that designed for beds?
It's designed for 96.
For 96? What would it cost, or Chris possibly would know this, but for all members present, somebody can maybe answer it. What would it take to remodel, I don't know, weld steel plates on the wall, whatever it takes to make it a higher security, to allow maybe dormitory or maybe individual cells? I can't imagine that we can afford individual cells, but what would it take to have that just be regular housing? Because I don't see us going back to work release myself, just because Kelly got the people out in the community anyway, and why not keep them in custody?
So I'm going to interject, because we don't have a price tag for that. And it would need to be, and I should defer to the sheriff on this, but I believe it does need to be single cells. That's what we need. We don't need more dormitory space.
Okay, well, even single cells, what would that take to come up with some single cell? How many could we put in there, 40 or?
We don't have an estimate on what that would cost.
But could we have Chris look at that at the same time and give us a rough idea? Because I don't think we're gonna go back to work release for a while. I mean, watching what's going on the governor's level with state prisons, watching what's going on nationally, going on here locally. The judges in the past, the judges always wanted to hammer somebody to make sure they were in jail. I don't see that happening anymore. I don't think we need work release, so.
Well, certainly there's a way to explore any options that might be on the table. As far as revising this current contract and the scope of work we have with the AE firm right now, that would take additional time. If we're going to look at something like that, it should be a project development study and a program and requirements like we did before that will take several months to accomplish without just throwing a number out and people latching onto it and thinking that's the budget. That would be a very dangerous thing to do. So yes, we could look at that, but we need to be aware that that would take additional time and additional funds to get that estimate in a place that is justifiable and reliable.
I'd like to hear what Todd or the sheriff has to say, maybe about that concept, about the whole work release thing.
Well, what I would say is that I really don't know what the future holds for options. I know that it's a great program that we have right now. And to turn it into sealed units, I think it would probably cost more just because you're trying to change that space into something that it wasn't designed for. But if you're going to use it at all, it'd be more for, and I'll let Todd answer to that, but more for dormitory style efficiencies or for people who are doing the work around the complex. But other than that, it really would not be feasible, in my opinion, to turn it into sealed space at all, just because of the amount of money that it would take to just revisit that, yet alone build it. And I still think you'd be better off starting from scratch than having to go into something and reconfigure a whole part of that building into sealed units. But I'll let Todd answer to that.
Just to describe the building itself, it was originally Al's Welding. So it's a large aluminum frame type building. There's only 2 dormitories. The male side is 78 bunks, the female side is 18. And it's more, how do I describe it, type submarine type housing. The bunks are very close. So it's not, I don't know what the exact square footage is, but it's not a whole lot of space. So I'm trying to envision taking that existing space and trying to add as many cells as we possibly could. And I've voiced this concern in the past, and I understand this is a very difficult decision, but I think at some point we need to look towards the future as well, because if we look for ideas, and this is no disrespect intended to anybody, to kind of piecemeal, that's what we're going to be dealing with, or somebody's going to be dealing with it, 10 years from now. I think in looking at the flex unit and how we designed it with the 40 beds and the shell with the possible expansion to 120, that gives us something to build upon in the future versus taking something and remodeling it to what we need right then and there with no ability to expand in the future.
So my thoughts on this, and I'm going to turn it over to Romero in a moment, is it is a big decision to make. It's an expensive decision to make. It's a mandatory decision to make. And we've decided after a couple of years of study and project research to move in a direction. And then it's like, hang on, let's look at this regional concept. And then it's, no, we need to do something with DRW coming down our neck, along with, as the sheriff said, I was concerned as well with the emptying of all of our prisons. These folks need somewhere to go, and we're a likely place for them to come. And it's not an issue that's going to go away anytime soon. And to do further work on work release or other options is going to take months to delay. I'm frustrated by this. I think we need to move in one direction and move in that direction without being sidetracked constantly with whatever comes up that might be new and shiny. These things that might be new and shiny might be viable down the road, but at this point in time, I'm not sure anything's going to come together quickly enough to address our current need for at least the shell and additional beds. Commissioner Menzer?
Well, everything that's been said in this meeting to this point is almost exact same conversation we had about a year ago. And I haven't, and what I heard and what I thought a year ago, I think today. The needs are absolutely there. You guys don't have to argue that to me. But one thing has totally changed, which is our financial forecast for our future based on this health crisis. So to me, that was the reason why I felt like the conversation needed to be reevaluated. My first choice would be to build the 118-bed flex unit, build it in partnership with the City of Olympia through a process that we've got started through TRPC, saving both jurisdictions money on both capital expenditure and operational expenditure. But I don't know if that's going to happen. It's just a process, and I don't know if the jurisdictions will come to agreement. So if we end up in a place where Thurston County is going it alone, I think we have to put the pause button on this project, just like we did on our courthouse project. I cannot justify plowing ahead with a plan to spend $25 million plus at least 10 to 15 more FTEs when I'm faced with a financial forecast that's going to show massive budget cuts, layoffs. I think we absolutely have to put the pause on this. My second choice is I understand the need, and I understand that doing nothing is not an option. Absolutely. I also do not want to see the sheriff's office operating in two different locations. So I do not like the idea of refurbishing the FJC beds or even refurbishing beds underneath this facility, because that's just going to exponentiate operational costs and cause all kinds of headaches for the sheriff. I would like him to be able to operate in his location in a seamless, efficient fashion. So now I'm looking at things that, like the modular idea, or the work release thing that Commissioner Edwards is talking about. Those are starting to become they weren't attractive to me because they're not a great long-term solution. But the budget realities, I think, are changing the complexion of what I think is possible for us to do to meet our needs. So my vote is to put the pause on what we've been doing and look at these other options that will keep the sheriff working on site but be cheaper and less operational expense. I don't know what else to do.
And I want to ask real quick, this money comes from detention sales tax or REIT?
REIT.
REIT?
The
Okay.
construction money would be REIT, and then the operational costs would be split between detention sales tax to the extent that it is available and general fund.
And general
Those
fund.
are the funding sources.
And that REIT money chows up all the money that potentially that we have to do other things. Probably a year ago, I was more optimistic about the courthouse initiative passing. So we're gonna be faced with the need to create new courtrooms. We're gonna be faced with the need to do a whole bunch of things that I feel like we're sitting in a different place today than we were a year ago when we all reluctantly pulled the trigger to move this project forward.
Under also, not only the direct needs the sheriff has and the jail has, but under DRW's scrutiny as well.
Chris, could you give us a little more detail what that means to meet your deadline of 2 weeks? That you said kind of on the outside, 2 weeks. What happens if we do put this on hold and we don't come up with a decision for a month? I don't know. I'm just curious what the difference is. You said 2 weeks.
Right.
I have to say, all these outfits are probably gonna be scrambling for work at some point. So I don't see that we're gonna lose out that way. I'm curious about what your opinion is on that. Why you said we have 2 weeks to make a decision.
Right. So in my discussions with the AE firm, when I was told to stand down on this project, they basically indicated that they have work already on the books where they're going to redirect the current resources to those other projects. That is going to happen. The 2 week number, that's a number that we talked about before they can reassess and realign their resources to move on to these other projects. something else to consider here is the fact that once this thing breaks loose and the coronavirus situation is gone and allows everyone to go back to work, there will be an absolute scramble for not only the design AE firms, but the construction industry as a whole to get back to work. It will be incredibly competitive at that point because, like you said, Gary, there will be a lot of projects that are going to need to get done, and it's going to just drive the competitiveness. Because this is about an 8-month schedule for this design, if we get the design finished now and this whole coronavirus thing is over within that period of time, we will have incredibly competitive bidding market to get this construction accomplished. Now, I know that we came up with justifiable, detailed cost analysis in the last report that we provided to you guys, and those numbers were based on the current market conditions and escalation rates in the market the way that it stood at that time. Those numbers will go down. Escalation rates will go down. It will be incredibly competitive. We went through this on the federal side during the Recovery Act process, and we got incredibly good construction fee proposals during that time because the market was so incredibly competitive. So again, we have an 8-month design period that we need to, if we're gonna start on it, we need to figure that 8 months later we'll have the design in our hand. During this design process, we'll have different iterations of the design that come up. We'll have updated cost estimates as we move forward with more detail. We will have updated construction schedules as we move forward with more detail, and we'll also have other options and costs for those options as we move forward. To have the designs on the shelf and ready for bidding would be an advantage to the county when it comes to bidding these for construction. So a little bit of extra input there. Did that answer your question, Gary?
Well, yes, it does to a degree, but on the other hand, if we move forward with the design phase of it, and then we change our mind, we're starting from scratch again anyway. So that's what my concern is today, because we don't know what's coming.
Right.
I believe that the state's gonna be laying off 10,000 people here in Thurston County before long. And,
Please.
pardon?
Nothing.
Well, no, I mean, I see things changing dramatically in the next 3 or 4 months. I think we're in for a rude awakening when it's all said and done, and I don't know where we're at. And I hate to get locked into something that we would just have to revamp anyway. So that's why I'm kind of with the commissioner as far as waiting a little bit, and it's gonna be beyond your 2 weeks for sure. I'd say we probably won't even make a decision. I don't know, maybe a month or 6 weeks down the road, we might be able to make a decision. I'm not ready to make it today, though.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead, Romero.
So, the board already made a decision a few months ago to move forward with the flex unit and the design of the shell. So that, I think what you're considering right now is to stop that.
Well, put it
To
on
stop the
hold
process.
or whatever.
And if you put it on hold, with all the respect, is to do what? To give us a direction to explore other options?
Maybe.
To give direction to explore other options, I think the board needs to be prepared to spend money.
Good bit of money.
Hold on a second. To spend money, because if the expectation of the board is to come up with options with soft numbers, we're gonna be back to this document.
Right.
That we're gonna be having a conversation with you again as to where the numbers came from without putting an investment on the options. So
Yeah, I think it's kind of a bifurcated, and that is with options, only the option of being the temporary trailers or whatever the temporary fix was. But also, as Commissioner Menser was saying, put it on pause because of the potential major financial hit that the county is going to take. And if we're committed, then we're committed. Now, I'm not saying that's what I'm hearing. But you want to add?
Well, I just want to tell you where I'm at. I'm not going to be ready, if there's an economy option, then maybe, but I'm not going to be ready to authorize a long-term or a luxury option, so to speak, until I know how long this pandemic's gonna last and have some preliminary financial forecasts about what it's gonna do to us. And that may be the fall, I don't know, but until I feel comfortable that we're through, we're through the tunnel and we see what's before us, I'm not gonna be comfortable authorizing a major long-term expenditure.
Thank you for the clarification, because that's what I was asking as to what the pause means. Is it?
That could just be me, but
So pause means just wait until how the economy is gonna be after this crisis is over, or pause to explore other options?
the flex unit may make sense after this crisis is over, and it may not.
I
And
want,
it's I feel it's irresponsible to not spend the time to find out. I mean, to find out where we're at in a number of weeks, hopefully weeks, maybe months.
and I want to move on with A&E based on what Chris had just said as well, because this doing nothing is not an option. And I just want to press forward and take each step as it comes and make our decisions accordingly. Gary?
Chris, following up on what the chair said, how many other firms, I mean, we're kind of locked in, I take it, with one firm, but aren't there gonna be other firms out there that could, get in the mix and would maybe want to get in the mix a month from now, or, I don't know, I'm just.
So to answer the question, yes, there are other firms that do this kind of work. There's not an unlimited amount. There are, I would say, several within our area. It's a pretty specialized type of design. It's the pricing may or may not change significantly at all for the design piece of it. I base the design and the cost on the state's maximum award contract type schedule, and we negotiated the fee within that schedule. And so, yes, there are other alternatives as far as AE firms that can do this work. There aren't many, but the pricing really won't change that much for this type of design. It may get a little bit more competitive, but again, this is a very specialized type of design. And so we're limited in the AE firms that we can actually approach.
Hey, Chris, how many proposals did we receive on the request for proposals?
So this was an amendment to an existing contract, and we were able to streamline the process and go right to DLR for this. But again, in our review and our evaluation of their fee proposals, it was exactly where we needed it to be, a little bit on the low side actually, because we negotiated pretty hard. Where we came up with on the POR that we presented to the board earlier was part of the schematic design. So we're able to take that as a credit to the fee proposal, and this was not an open type procurement process, Romero. We went right to the same design firm that had done the POR because we knew we could get some benefits by them actually being involved with the project and having that knowledge about this particular facility.
So I'm hearing pause, move ahead, and options.
Well, okay, but here I want to throw something in here that the county manager brought up. That was in the old reality when we put that out for bids even. That was when the economy was hot. And things have changed so much now that I can't move ahead at this point either. I'm pretty well locked in with Commissioner Menser on the fact that we don't know what's coming down the pike. We've got a new reality that's yet to develop. We don't even know what it is. And we don't know if we're gonna have a relapse. We don't know if we're gonna try to open up the economy and get things moving. We don't know if the governor's gonna agree with us on getting buildings started, and which I think it makes sense. And even California and Oregon thought it made sense. So I don't know where we're at, and I'm not willing to move forward right now. And I believe that we should go on pause. And where does that pause take us? Well, let's continue to talk about this and see if we can come up with something and kick it around, but I'm not ready to move forward right now. And I don't think it's gonna be that detrimental to us, because I do think there's gonna be competition when we finally decide to move based on what the economy is gonna look like. And I just see too many variables to step forward right now.
And I'm with you. I don't think though, from the standpoint, I don't think it's detrimental to the county to have DLR go ahead with the next phase of this. So that we are, depending on what happens, if it gets worse, it'll get worse. It'll stay the same or it'll get better, we don't know. But we'll be 8 months ahead of schedule.
Sheriff,
Commissioner Hutchins, I had a question.
Sheriff has his hand up.
Oh, Sheriff, go ahead and see it, man.
So I've only been the sheriff since 2011. I've never ever heard our budget is really good. As a matter of fact, I've heard the same thing that all of you are saying right now. Every year I hear that. And the unfortunate part is that you three are over there. This jail is about 3 miles away from you, and you do not know what the men and women here are going through because A, they're understaffed, and yet they are having to decide who goes into maximum custody, who goes into medium, and who goes into minimum. And it's because of this is why it has drawn the attention to Disability Rights of Washington. It is easy to say that you can put things on pause, but I don't get to tell my people that. I don't get to tell the men and women, you guys, it's okay, be on pause because the commissioners are gonna make a decision maybe when the economy gets better, which it never has since I've been the sheriff. And so then it's gonna come down to monies, which we never have. And then you're asking the men and women of the sheriff's office to compensate because it is unable, the commissioners are unable to come up with a decision of how they're gonna make things work or not work. But I'm just saying right now that it's extremely important that however you three decide to get together and make a decision, I hope it's sooner than later because it does impact the men and women of this sheriff's office on how they are treated and what they're having to go through every day dealing with the mentally ill, the mental challenged, the high-risk offenders, and what they're going through. And it's easy to sit where you're at and pass judgment, yet alone expect the men and women of this office to do all the job that they're doing and the courageous work that they do for the citizens of Thurston County. So I hope that you expedite your decisions.
I agree with you, but I disagree with the part that it's not easy. This is not easy. This is not easy to make these decisions. And that's why I was advocating what I was advocating. Move ahead.
Could I provide
Go ahead.
a suggestion?
Yep.
And I understand the economy, we don't know how the economy is gonna be after getting through this emergency. My suggestion for your consideration will be to continue with the design, but you don't have to commit to construction.
Yeah.
And because that's the major costs that you have. And at that point, you may consider making another decision, whether you'd like to move to construction or not. But at least moving on the direction that perhaps addresses at least from my point of view, the risk associated with the Disabilities Right of Washington may be an option that you may want to consider.
That's what I've been proposing. Go ahead.
I am more concerned with the staff than I am with Disabilities of Washington. They're gonna have their hands full with so many other things. I don't think they're gonna be coming around. I am concerned about staff. So, it worries me though, that we're gonna move forward and we're not gonna get anything done for, what did you say, Chris? 6 months
We're not
before we
getting
get
it done now.
design?
We have currently the schedule for design is 8 months.
Is 8 months, okay.
That's correct.
So it's gonna be 8 months before we do anything. Well, let's make it 9 months before we do something. And put this on hold right now for, I don't know, 2 weeks to start with, but I think we need to schedule some meetings, just like we're having today. And maybe others can be involved, even though we've got this virus issue. I think there's people that can sit at this table. I think you're gonna be kind of getting back to normal here pretty quick. But I'm really concerned that a design firm, I don't think that this is that big of a deal. from a design firm perspective, we might get 4 design firms that come in and say, well, we'll do this for $1 million.
If we're just to have more meetings to go over what we just went over, that's a waste of time. I'm
Well,
I'm
we
tired
better
of
do some
rinse and
research.
repeat, wash, rinse and repeat. I wanna move ahead, because of staff reasons as well, but DRW
Well,
liability. But go ahead, Robin, we gotta wrap it up.
So my question is, if we schedule next meetings, what is it that you would expect to see at those meetings? Because in 2 weeks, we cannot have decent current numbers for any of these options. It will take longer than 2 weeks.
before
and
we
it
can
will
even have a get-together to
cost
discuss
money.
it.
Well, you can discuss it, but what would you like to
What's the
discuss?
Well, I don't wanna discuss it like Hutch says, I don't wanna just kick the same thing around, I wanna have some new information.
And that's what,
There's a lot of
We can't bring you
frustration.
new information in 2 weeks.
The
That's what I-
frustration from the sheriff's office all the way throughout, and the sheriff's department throughout.
Yep.
And just discussing it again, having another meeting, you're right, we're not gonna get substantive updates and information. It's just a waste of time. It's a waste of their time, it's a waste of our time, and a waste of Zoom time.
You
have
know,
something to add?
Well, just a couple things. One is, if we can work out an interlocal agreement with these other jurisdictions, I'll authorize to design and build a 118 bed flex unit. Number two, so let's work on that. I already had my initial interview with Mark Daly. You'll all be getting a call. Number two, 2 weeks, right, but that's not gonna help me anyway, because I'm not gonna know where the economy's stand and where this pandemic's at in 2 weeks. So I wanna take a longer period of time. Sure, work up some details on the other options, great, so that we can not waste any time. But ultimately, unless we can get a regional agreement to share costs, which I would put into my economy option bucket, because we'd be unquestionably saving the taxpayers money long-term, then I'm not gonna be ready to make a non-economy decision until I know where this pandemic's at and where our budget's at. Right now, there's a hole being dug for us, and it's still being dug. I don't know where the bottom is. I don't know when the hole's gonna stop being dug, and when it's done, how deep it's gonna be. So how could I possibly, when I'm gonna be laying people off, authorize 15 more corrections officers to be hired, when I'm gonna have to put, it's ludicrous to think that this project should plow ahead in this climate.
And to finalize it, that's why, to move ahead with Chris's idea, move ahead with the projection of with DLR, to get us ahead keep us on schedule, we're already behind schedule, but get this to the design, to the A&E phase, then we can decide as we go along. But we're not doing anything right now, but if we get DLR online and starting to do this stuff, we get work done.
who's
the
DR?
consultant.
DLR,
It's
the
the
consultant,
consultant who would do the design, that's the design firm.
that's the design.
And we went out to
To
some
design.
RFP originally to get this all lined out.
We
Yes.
did not, no, we did
We
not
had,
do an
an RFP way
RFP, we
before.
had,
Way back.
the RFP was some time ago, and then we built on a current contract.
Okay, I guess what I'm gonna say about that is, that RFP, if we didn't go to an RFP,
If we
we
did,
expanded something.
If
But if we
there
would've
wasn't
if we
something-
would've done that back a while, we're talking about an economy that was booming at the time, and probably would've got a different response. Because in some of the issues that we went out to get contracts for, we didn't even get anybody to apply, I think, putting
Yeah.
cameras up or whatever it was. Roof jobs, different things. So I think by moving ahead, right now, we're being premature. I'm with Ty, but I wanna get more information, and possibly in 2 weeks, we might be closer. I don't see where 2 weeks is gonna hurt us, and I'd like to make sure we revisit this
Okay,
in
you
2
made your
weeks.
point, Commissioner.
Okay.
You made yours, we made ours.
So-
Remember, we gotta wrap this up.
So what I'm hearing is, obviously there's majority of the board that like to pause this project. The majority.
The majority, thank you.
And that's what I'm hearing. The Commissioner Menser and Commissioner Edwards would like to pause this project, you would like to continue on. So I think we have a board decision to pause this project. The question that I have is, I have two different options as to what this pause really means. I'm hearing the pause until we know how the dip hole of this economy is gonna be, as a result of this emergency. And after that, then you will revisit this decision.
Or whether our regional
Right.
proposal comes
Yeah,
in.
along the way, parallel to that is the regional proposal that is part of that. But also I'm hearing pause until we can get additional information related to other options, which that creates yet another set of concerns to me. Because what is it? Because we need to invest money and come up with real numbers for you to make an informed decision. Because if we're gonna wait another, let's say 3 weeks and expect the Chris come up and revisit those numbers, still we're gonna be going back to the same issues. Are those realistic numbers?
Groundhog's Day, yeah.
Right, so what I'm hearing is pause this project, get additional information related to the economy. I don't know when that could be. We just have to see how that is as this emergency evolves. And also what I'm hearing is from Commissioner Messer, at the same time, the parallel track of this regional facility could bring additional information before you make another decision. Is that
Yeah,
what I'm
well,
hearing?
what I'm hearing is delay, then delay.
I also thought I heard Commissioner Mensah, and so this is just a clarifying question. Were you asking for options, less expensive potentially options?
Well, I think that puts us in a position where when the economy's back up, then we find out, oh gosh, we've got no money. We're laying people, we're massive budget cuts, massive layoffs. What are we gonna do to meet our jail needs, which we still have the need? Then we would have other things on the table. I'm not demanding that, I'm just suggesting that's probably a good idea from my perspective.
No, and
Is it
I'm
with-
not.
So we have the minimal delay possible. I want the minimum delay possible.
I'm not
Necessary.
arguing with this issue, I'm asking for clarification, because following up on Robin's clarification, in order to look for other options, we need to invest money and time.
Right. We
And
would
that's really,
need to hire.
that's where I am. I mean, if that is the direction of the board, we'll carry the direction of the board to spend money and time to come up with options. That's the only thing I'm asking for clarification, because
Properly fleshed out
Yeah.
options.
yeah, and because what I'm hearing is the majority of the board has decided to pause this project. And that is clear.
How long before we're gonna revisit this? Can we have another discussion in 2 weeks?
Chris, how long would it take to get reasonable ballpark estimates for other options?
So what I would need to do there is I'd need to figure out what these options really are, write a scope of work which outlines each one of these alternatives, put that scope of work then out to bid to consultants that do this type of thing, negotiate the fee there. So, there's a lot of steps that go into this. And as a project development study, I would say it would be probably a couple of months before we had the final document showing us what kind of numbers that are justifiable we would be looking at.
Well, the last thing I wanna do is move forward prematurely, find out that we've got an empty shell sitting over there. We can't even add the staff that's needed to run it, let alone run the existing facility that
It's
we've
just the
got.
design of it, not building it.
I know,
It's the design.
but it's the design, in my estimation, it's the design that maybe didn't consider all the options. That's my concern, so. I'm
So the
good.
decision of the majority of the board is to pause.
Yep.
And they come back, not in 2 weeks, because that's silly. Come back,
I don't know if it's silly or not. I think we ought to have it on our agenda to at least discuss it.
we won't have any more information. Gary.
Well, we're gonna have some information about, well, the governor just laid off 10,000 people or whatever. I mean, some crazy deal, or we've had a relapse and now we're going to extend the stay-at-home order for 6 months. So those kind of things are gonna play in. We just don't know what's coming yet. This is not like anything else we've ever dealt with. This is a new reality that is developing in front of our eyes right now. And I don't feel comfortable with moving right now with this only option. And I don't like the idea that we're accepting a bid proposal from when the economy was red hot to where it's ice cold.
Just to clarify what that bid was way back when, that was a bid for some initial analysis. That was not a bid on
It was a
the
professional
design of this
services.
building.
It was professional
So,
services.
just to be absolutely clear, that was not the $2 million bid to do the design.
Okay.
TCSO, thank you very much. Chris, thank you very much. We're 15, 16 minutes over. We're done. Thank you.